Welcome to the future of work. I'm so glad you guys are back joining us again. As always, this is the live stream where we talk about how forward thinking organizations are using Giant to take their organization to the next level. I'm Bronson, the CEO of Giant, and with me as always is Mike, our president. Mike, how you doing today?
I think I'm doing okay. I was thinking this morning, and you're going to ask me this question, and I thought the only days I'm ever fired up are the days that end in day. So if today's Thursday, then I'm probably fired up, Bronson. That's how I feel.
You know, that's why I like working with you. Your energy is consistent. Your work ethic is consistent. We were joking because yesterday we were together all day. So I got to follow Mike around, and he gets so much done in a given work day that I end the day and I'm just tired. You can't keep up with Mike. So that's awesome to hear. So today we're going to dig in more on the same theme we've been talking about, which is companies, organizations that are using the Invincible product and they've scored low in a certain area, and now they're doing a team exercise to improve that score. And so just so people realize, this is a part of the Invincible operating system that we implement in organizations. So when an organization comes to us and they say, well, what do you do? We say, well, the quick answer is we would like to implement the Invincible operating system. And they're like, well, what is that? And we say, well, it's an assessment is where it starts. We want to assess the current health of your organization and your individual teams. Because if you don't know current reality, you can't actually move the needle in the right direction. And if you do, it'll be accidental. So we tell people it starts with an assessment. And then we have this toolkit, these really powerful visual tools based on neurolinguistics that can really just change people, change the way they think, change the way they see situations. We call them lenses and mirrors. Lenses let you see the world differently. Mirrors reflect back truths that you maybe didn't know. And then lastly, we have a process. And we take your teams through a process and your leadership through a process to improve those low scores in the assessment. So for perspective, where we're at in the Invincible OS is we've already taken the assessment for the sake of this call. We've already taken the assessment and we've scored low in alignment. We know the toolkit, so we know the tool that we want to teach, but now we're in the process and we're actually going to do a team exercise to improve alignment for a certain team. So is that fair enough, Mike? Is that where we're at?
Yeah, you're exactly right, Bronson. I love the simplicity of, and you said this yesterday on a call, but basically, if you don't have all three of those components, you can't become invincible. You actually have to have the assessment to figure out what's wrong. Let's get a benchmark of reality and where do we need to go? You need a toolkit for the things to do to actually improve those scores. And you need a process that is consistent over time so that you can actually benchmark, but then see improvement. So for me, I love it. It's like we took an assessment. We know there's some tools, but we're in the process going, what do we do about alignment? Our alignment score was horrible. How do we fix that? Well, guess what? You can go to the platform and find the exercise.
Absolutely. So here you see the platform. So we're on Invincible, and we're actually going to click through and say, you know, let's look at our scores. So again, this is our actual scores for Giant. We use our own products. So we're going to imagine for a moment that when it comes to alignment, even though we're at a 91%, we're going to pretend for a minute that this is a weak score for us and that we want to focus on alignment, and so that we can actually do this team exercise that aligns to that. So you'll notice on Invincible, here's a lot of team exercises. And if you click view all, there's even more team exercises. But we're going to focus on the organizational clarity exercise. And so this is for alignment. This is something you can do with your team to really improve that score, to get everyone on the same page. We're not going to go through every single question of this as if we were doing the exercise, but we are going to talk about the tool, the organizational clarity tool, and just have some conversation around it that'll be similar to what will happen in your team. So Mike, why don't you walk us through at least the words in red and what the org clarity tool is? Give us a high level idea of what we're looking at here.
Yeah, I will, Bronson. I'm going to keep it at a high level because we found that this tool actually can be a day long or a 2 day long experience. I mean, you're opening up some cans here, but the reality is that if you take this tool at a high level and do a quick assessment, you can figure out why these things are important and where our holes or our gaps are in our execution today. So let's start at the top. And it really does, it's very important to start at the top and work your way down the middle, and then you'll see the horizontal axis, which is important there as well. But basically, the first question you have to ask is leadership. Are roles and responsibilities clear at every level in the organization? We found for decades and with thousands of organizations around the world that organizations rise and fall on leadership. Teams rise and fall on leadership. So you got to start there and say, are our roles and responsibilities clear for every person and every leader at every level? You earn the right to come down and say, okay, we feel clear. We've got the leaders defined of the teams and of the different parts of the organization. Now we have to make sure, do we have a vision? Is it clear and compelling? Is the vision something that lights a fire in your belly and gets you fired up to come to work every day? Is there something, is it more than just we exist to create widgets or something like that? Like, is there something that actually drives you out of bed? And then what are your core values? Do people know and live the values? You guys, my dad would always tell me Enron had values. One of Enron's values was probably something like integrity, and it was written on the wall somewhere. So yeah, we know they had values and they were written on a card or a wall, but did they live the values? The reality is your company and your teams, they have to understand the values and they have to actually live them out. So you've got leadership defined, you've got vision and values. Okay, now what are we going to do? Well, now we have to have a strategy. How are we going to win? So strategy tells us, what initiatives will help us succeed or win. What's going to be the strategy around how we're going to go out and take the hill and achieve the things we want to achieve. From there, you have team cultures and subcultures, which is really important, and you've got structure. Under our team cultures, do we have healthy atmospheres to help us grow? So do we have a healthy greenhouse or environment around our teams to help them grow and achieve? And do we have the right structure? Do we have the right systems, people, and funding or capital in place to help us grow? So, hey, we've got this great strategy, Bronson. It looks good on paper, but do we actually have the right team and healthy teams? Do we have the right people? And do we have the right structure to achieve that? And then finally, if you have all that figured out, you move to tactics. Tactics goes, okay, given everything we talked about, what are we going to do today? Do people know how their everyday work is going to help the organization win? So you go from this big thing of like, okay, we've got nothing to, hey, we've got leadership. We know who those people are. We've got a vision that's compelling. We've got some values of how we live and work. They're kind of our guardrails. We have a strategy for how we're going to be successful. We've got the right people on the right bus, on the right seat, on the bus. And then you've got your structure. And then finally, what do we do today to help us achieve that compelling vision? So Bronson, again, high level, but in a nutshell, that's how this tool works. And that's how we actually use this to help teams become aligned.
Yeah. So now I want people to imagine that you had to put a score on each of these red words, 1 to 10, right? Leadership. And so you answer the question, are roles and responsibilities clear at every level? And you think, we're a 6 on that. So just do that in your head for a second. Mike, I want to ask you this question. If people have high scores on all these, what does that organization feel like? What does it look like? Is it more likely to succeed? Is it more likely to win their market? I mean, if you have a high score on all these red words, is that a big deal is essentially what I'm asking.
Yeah, I'm going to answer 2 things to that question. I'm going to say, number 1, here's what it feels like, because you notice that the score at Giant happened to be a 91%, right? No false humility here. It's a score where we've actually done really well. So what it feels like to come to work for me, Bronson, is it's exciting, it's fun, there's no drama, the rhythm is nice, like I don't feel pressure. Like there's a lot of things that I've felt in previous jobs, in previous companies, even in companies that I've led and owned, that have felt friction and drama and it's Monday. So what it feels like is the team says, hey, we actually are so aligned, we so believe in what's on the paper here that we love coming to work. So that's what it feels like. Now, I will say one more thing. You said, let's pretend it's a low score for us. I don't think that has to be true. We're doing it for the purpose of exercise, but even at a 91%, I think by the time we're done with this call, you and I can say, hey, what's the area that we're actually could become better in? Because even though we have 91%, we want to get as close to 100% as possible. And the last thing is this, because business changes every single day, it might have been 91% when we took it 2 weeks ago, but there might be something off now where it says it's an 83%. That's the idea of taking the assessment and benchmarking it. So over time, we see how is this fluctuating.
Yeah. So you actually came into our exec meeting. Was it last week or this week? I mean, time goes so fast, it's hard to even remember. And we did leadership. Our roles and responsibilities cleared every level. Yep. And we had a meeting kind of impromptu, of saying, okay, at the exec level, are we focused on the right things? Do we have the right responsibilities? And that 2-hour conversation, or however long it was, it really changed what we were going to focus on for the next season. And so we had that because business, like you said, it changes so fast that to think, set it and forget it, and it's just going to run that way forever. No, COVID happens. Everyone's roles change, or you lose a big client. Everyone's roles change. Or you need to take a new market and you're going to launch a new product and your roles change. Like everything is so fluid that this is something you have to revisit so often. Let me ask you this, Mike. So I'm looking at this, and it makes logical sense that you would start with leadership. The leadership decides the strategy decides the tactics. But in practice, I think a lot of people come to work and they do tactics and they don't really know what strategy they're attached to.
Yeah.
And they do strategies that don't really flow from the leadership. They're created kind of whatever somebody wants to do. It's their own strategy. Do you think that's true, that there's a lot of organizations that actually have arrows, but they're pointing up? It's people doing whatever seemed right that day, but it wasn't really clear leadership with a great strategy implemented in tactics?
No question. Absolutely. So the reality is this: we have this saying in Giant called slow down to speed up. The ultimate slow down to speed up with this tool means that you actually do the hard yards to get leadership right, to get your strategy right, and then from that comes your tactics. Most organizations that I've ever, all the ones I've been a part of, and most I've helped and consulted with, they start with tactics and putting out fires and you know what's going on today and what's the customer saying today and what email did I receive. That drives, it goes up, and it's like, okay, we need to kind of change the strategy. We need to kind of change. So no. The ultimate slowdown to speed up says start with leadership, get that right. Talk about your strategy. What's it going to take for us to win? What's our market product fit? And from there, what should we do to achieve that? But you couldn't be more right, Bronson. Most organizations, most people I know, they go to work and they start fighting fires and doing tactics based on the inputs coming in and receiving, and has nothing to do with the strategy or the leadership.
Yeah. So that's actually, we're really raw on this live stream. We talk about what's really happening because, we're not trying to hide anything or act like we're better than other organizations. So I'm going to give a real example from last night of tactics being first and us not putting strategy and leadership first. So I had a call with the dev team last night, and I was working through their to-do list. And I'm just, okay, so what are you doing and how's it getting done? And we're talking through all the various items. And then it hit me, there's no strategy behind the order of operation of to-dos in our dev team, right? And that's a failure of mine because I hadn't created a strategy. And so the strategy really was what was the easiest thing to accomplish. And I was like, well, I don't know if I agree with that as the strategy for what we should be doing. Or the strategy was which customer is loudest about needing that thing done in the development. And it's like, well, I don't know if I agree with that strategy. But then it's like, well, then the question's put back on me. Well, then what is a strategy? And I said, I don't know. I don't know what the algorithm is. I don't know what the strategy is for you to have done it better. Therefore, we did tactics. We were doing a lot of stuff without a clear strategy of order of operation. But where's the strategy come from? Well, from the leadership. It's our failure that the wrong tactics were being accomplished potentially, right? So it's just one of those things where I think we get it right most of the time. And then when we don't, it's like, ooh, let's own that and let's figure out how to actually get things to flow from leadership to strategy to tactics. Because you're right. You said put out fires. It's what it feels like when you do it bottom up. Everything's a little bit chaotic. Everything's a little bit by the seat of your pants. Everything is just, you don't see how it all really fits together. We have a question that came in here. It said, it's from Anthony. He says, do you find nuances in how to best roll this tool out to different types of organizations, corporate versus nonprofit versus government, for example? What do you think, Mike? There's some big differences in those kinds of organizations. Does this apply, or do you have to find different ways to teach it for them?
Yeah, and I don't want, Anthony, this is my opinion, so don't take this as like gospel, but I would say, Anthony, I've found that organizations are organizations. That's why it's called organizational clarity, because even your corporate or nonprofit or government, or education, you're still an organization of people, and organizations tend to run the same way. As a matter of fact, there's a story from old, literally in the history books, about a guy who taught this dude how to have organization. He said, you're basically fighting fires for every person in your camp. You should actually put them in leaders of hundreds and fives. And so he basically created the first org structure we've ever seen. And basically ever since then, every organization has run the same way, where you've got leaders who have been defined, who have been given a vision. Those leaders have had to cast that vision in a compelling way, which attracts other people to be a part of it. And from there come a value system with how you're going to operate. And there comes a strategy for how we're going to achieve that vision. And then we have to do stuff on a daily basis. So my answer, Anthony, is that I actually think it's the same. Now, within the organization, you're going to have a ton of nuances. Well, we were just two guys who kind of came together, or we had a gal who told us that, like, there's going to be a myriad of different unique things. But in terms of how you look at an organization, this will tend to be true across the board.
Yeah, that's a great answer. Thank you, Mike. Something else I'm noticing as I look at this org clarity tool, I noticed that vision and values is above strategy, right? So you have the leadership creating vision and values. Speak to that. Why can't we just say, here are the leaders, here's your responsibility, now go get me a strategy. Let's implement something here with tactics. Why are the vision and values so high up on this? And is it just, like you said it, Enron had vision and values. What do we really mean here, right? Is it just a document that you wrote, or does it mean something more that actually informs your strategy?
Yeah, and I think, the word integrity came to mind, Bronson, is like your vision and values should have integrity, which means it's integral or whole or it's one, meaning we said our value was to have self-awareness, so we actually have to do it. So for me, we said our vision was to raise up liberators or unlock the potential of people, so we have to do it. So first of all, I'm going to answer your first part of your question, which is you've got to have vision and values to know, why are we here? What are we doing? What are we trying to accomplish? It's not about leaders saying, hey, here's a strategy to go, like, well, what were we trying to accomplish? What was the point in the first place? It's really your why. People talk about, your unique or your why. So that's where the vision comes from. And then the values is really, Justin Westbrook often says, it's our guardrails for how are we going to operate to achieve that vision. So we don't get to say, okay, so our vision is to raise up liberators or unlock the potential of people, but one of our values is by hurting people in the process. It's like, well, wait a minute, that's not aligned with actually providing potential for people. So you have to make sure that there's an alignment there. And then to your point is you don't just get to write them. I mean, again, what I would say, and I'm sorry for picking on Enron today, but I would say is they had a vision. I bet it was compelling and it attracted a lot of people. They had values. I guarantee they're written somewhere and you could probably Google them and you'd find out what they were. And you might go, I want to be a part of that company. In the end, the leadership decided that they were not going to live in consistency with the vision and the values, which is why you found them in the place they were. So in the end, something became more important to them than the vision and values that were stated. So they decided to go off the rails.
Yeah. Now, let me ask you a deep question, and you may not have an answer to this. I don't know if there is an answer to this, right? So let's have fun for a second. Vision, right? Are visions given to leaders, or do leaders select a vision from a lot of options? So what I'm getting at here is vision something where you're compelled to do it, you can't say no to it, you have to do it, so you need to do it. And you don't even know why. It's like this invisible force driving you toward this vision. Or is it not that complicated? Is it actually just, you know what? There's a lot of things you could do in life. There's a lot of things you could stand for. There's a lot of things you could try to accomplish and leave as your legacy before you die. Pick one of them, have fun. Well, where do you land on that?
Yeah, well, that's a deep question. My observation is that vision is usually compelling. All of us have desires and things that are interesting to us and things that get us. And I was talking to one of our giants this morning. He said his wife is really driven right now by social justice and wanting to be a part of that conversation. My wife is not right now. Do you see what I'm saying? Like there's something driving her that she can't quite explain. So here's two things of that. Number one, we are not all given the vision that's supposed to drive the organization. As a matter of fact, I have two founding partners, and you know them, Jeremy and Steve. They had a vision which was giant, which was to unlock the potential of people around the world, raise the standard of leadership. That was a vision that they couldn't shake. And guess what? I heard their vision and I said, I want to be a part of that. So I was also compelled by that, but the vision wasn't given to me. So it might sound like I'm contradicting myself. I'm not. I'm saying this. You're either driven by something and saying, I can't shake this thing. I heard a leader one time say, you'll know when the vision is real when you can't shake it off your back. Like no matter what you do, like every time you turn around, you're like, I've got to solve this problem for the world. That's vision. Mm-hmm. But if a leader is compelled to go after that vision, you could be someone like me that says, I like that vision. I'm going to adopt that as my own. So it's not like I had to have my own vision. I was able to attach myself to a vision I believed in.
Yeah. See, that's why I have Mike on the show. I can ask any question as hard as I want, and he will come up with a pretty decent answer on the spot. Just so you guys know, we don't rehearse this show. We have no idea where it's going to go. Yeah. We don't know what we're going to talk about half the time. We're just having fun, teaching tools, trying to unlock people. Here's the way I think about vision. I agree with everything you said. Is keep asking why.
Yeah.
You can even start with tactics. Like, let me think for a second. Right now, today, I'm working on a webinar. That's literally what I was doing before this. And you could ask the question, well, why? And if you ask that question enough, you're going to bump into a strategy.
Yep.
And if you keep asking why, you're going to bump into vision and values and leadership, right? There's going to be something deeper if you just, so let's do it for a second.
Yeah.
You keep asking me why. Let's just see where it goes.
Yeah.
Today, I was working on a webinar.
Why?
Because we want to help more people become guides in our ecosystem to unlock companies.
Why does that matter? Who cares?
When a company's unlocked, people, and I'm actually trying to think through this, they
Yeah.
come to work, and one, they enjoy their life, and life is short, so I think we should enjoy it. One, their work has meaning because the people they're working with care about them, and they care about the people they're working with, and they're glad to be there. So if my webinar can help guides unlock people and organizations, there's going to be some real number of people because of the webinar I'm working on that actually get more out of this life and give more to the people around them.
Yeah. That sounds compelling to me because obviously we work together. But so what? So what happens when more organizations get unlocked and unlock their potential and basically become invincible? What happens?
Yeah, I think people can have purpose. Like, I feel like I have purpose. I feel like they can have purpose. I feel like they could actually be the best version of themselves, that they can actually love others as they love themselves. If we unlock people and we unlock teams and we unlock organizations, they're going to be filled up and overflow so they can give that to other people. I mean, I would say that's a vision. Those are some core values, right? But it started with what? A tactic. And we just kept asking why. And you have to do that to yourself, right? Find the really big thing, like Mike said, that you can't shake off. If you can change your direction in life every few days, it's not vision, right? Vision is just, it's stuck to you and you couldn't get rid of it if you wanted to. So Carrie says that is the magic of the show, raw, real, and relevant. I like those, the 3 R's.
3 R's, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, go ahead, Mike.
No, I was just gonna say that's us, the 3 R's. I love it, and I love the alliteration there of like raw, real, and relevant. But it's right, and I love that exercise, Bronson. And you covered something that's huge because I'd say even I have struggled mightily in the past with allowing the tactics or the to-do list drive my behavior. Like that's something this, Bronson. That is a weakness in my leadership. Is I'm like, hey, I woke up this morning and I've got a massive list of to do for work. I've got a massive list of to do with 4 kids and a spouse, and I'm just going to start smashing my list. And I don't slow down long enough. So I'm told you guys, slow down to speed up. I'm speaking to myself because one of my blind spots is putting my head down and just trying to smash 5,000 tasks. When we joke about it yesterday, but to Bronson's point, I have to go, why am I doing this? Well, if it's not helping me achieve my vision, then why would I waste my time? So I think it's a great exercise, Bronson, to ask yourself, why am I doing this? Why am I acting this way? Why am I behaving this way? What's really behind this?
Absolutely. If we could, let's share my screen again. And let's talk about structure for a second. Because the same way I talked about how sometimes the tail wags the dog with tactics and strategies, like we're doing tactics, but really it didn't start with strategy and it didn't start with leadership. I think the same thing can happen with structure. Structure is low on this, right? It's not as high as leadership. It's not as high as vision, values, or strategy. It's pretty low on the org clarity tool. So I have the hunch that a lot of us are slaves to the structure, even when the strategy changes, even when the leadership changes. And so do you think it's good to even revisit structure? Like, what are our systems? How do we do things? In what order? Where do we keep that information? Who has access to it? When is that meeting? Who's in that meeting? Do you think it's healthy to rethink structures on a regular basis? Or do you think actually, no, let's keep those baked as long as possible and even not change them when the strategy changes? Where do you land?
Yeah. Here's the thing. Every one of us has heard this before. Someone says this, we're not going to do that because we've always done it this other way. I've heard that in every organization I've ever been in. No, we're not going to do that because that's not how we do it. That's not how we do things. We do it this way. We've always done it this way. The problem with being too rigid to your structures is your leadership and your strategy, we talked about this before, have to be agile. They have to be changing with your market conditions, with financial realities, with a myriad of things. So if that's true, your structures have to be agile as well. Now, if I come into work every day and change the structure, Bronson, what do you think our team would do?
They'd probably feel like they're being jerked around every which direction. They'd be confused. They'd eventually be annoyed and frustrated.
It would undermine my influence and they wouldn't trust my leadership. So like everything else, there's going to be a balance to so what I don't want to hear is that's not how we do things. We never do it that way. I also don't want to hear, hey, if there's a new idea or new input, let's just change it. Right. So unfortunately, like everything else, there's 2 sides, there's 2 ends of the spectrum. You want to try to tend towards the middle of we're not so rigid. We squelch out, innovation, ingenuity, but we also, are not changing all the time that we jerk people around.
Yeah. And this is so good. I'm glad you said that because in leadership, things are not binary. It's not like this is 100% the right option and this is 100% the wrong option.
No.
Almost everything is gray. You could do it that way or you could do it this way. And someone's going to make a decision and you're going to be wrong sometimes. You're going to be right sometimes.
Yep.
And leadership is being willing to make that decision, knowing that you might be wrong and that there is no perfect decision. A lot of leadership is, do you change the structure? Well, you can, or you can leave it. What do you want to do? Right? There's a chance changing it, it's not right time. There's a chance changing it unlocks new potential. And that's why there is no silver bullet. It takes somebody with wisdom, with grit, with advisors, to really lead at any level of anything. So we've kind of talked about a lot of these. We haven't really talked about team cultures yet. It seems like, in my experience, that when the leadership is really clear with roles and responsibilities, when the vision is clear and compelling, when the values are known and lived out, when there's a strategy that just makes sense and we're like, yes, I believe in that strategy, when there's tactics, I know what to do today, and there's structures that are workable, I know the rhythm that things are going to happen in, that the culture's good. It seems like it's almost a byproduct of getting those other pieces right. Would you agree with that? That team culture almost comes along for the ride if you do the hard work in the other areas? Or is there specific team culture things you still need to do even if you get the other things right? Where do you land on that?
It's a good question. At first, I felt like you were leading the witness, but actually you opened up an opportunity for me, which is the reality. I think when you do the hard yards on the rest of it, you're going to have healthy culture. People know what's expected of them. They know why we exist. They know how we do things, and that those are values that people would want to aspire to. There's a clear strategy in place. You've got the right structure. When you have those things done, it's like, okay, there's a lot less noise in the system. There's a lot more simplicity. There's a lot less drama. However, I would say, given our emotional intelligence tools, I think one thing that would lack them, Bronson, is how do you add the human element into a team? So let's say you do the hard work. Really, this stuff is almost the logical clarity and the hey, we've documented, we understand what we do. Then there's the, hey, how do we do third gear? How do we do social time? How do you make sure you know more about me, that you don't just think of me as like a pawn on your chessboard and like, hey, Mike, you come to work every day. I didn't realize you had 4 kids. You do? So I would say, yes, this would be, you have to have that to have a healthy culture. There's another piece, which is almost this human element of like who people really are and what's the holistic version of themselves they bring to the table.
Yeah. And we didn't plan it this way, but that's actually a perfect segue into talking about our boot camp. So if you're watching this and you're interested, you're like, you know what? These tools are different. Like what I'm seeing on the screen here is different. And this team exercise, you could go through this with your team if you're, on our platform, if you're using Invincible. But one of the questions we get is, well, what's the first step? Like, where do we begin? And we actually begin with something that's going to help your team culture. We actually think the first step that is worth taking is a relational step. So if you want to do something with Giant, we don't start by saying, all right, let's get your roles and responsibilities figured out. It's like, well, there's a time for that. It's not like, okay, let's get your structures, right? Are you using Trello or using Slack? Or how are you doing this? And when's your meeting rhythm? It's like, no, those are important things. They have a role. We're actually going to probably focus on relationships as a, what? Why don't we know ourselves? Why don't we know the people around us? Why don't we actually figure out who's in the room with us as humans at the deepest level? And then we'll work on this other stuff. We'll figure out these other things, but we'll have that psychological safety to be able to do it. So one of the things we offer is something called a 5 Voices Bootcamp. So if you're watching this and you're on Ascend right now, you're going to see a button at the top of the screen, and it's going to say free 5 Voices Bootcamp. The link is also on the screen. You can go to giant.tv/bootcamp. If you're watching this from LinkedIn or Facebook or the other places that we stream, you can go to that button and click it, and it's going to tell you how the boot camp works. But essentially, here's what's going to happen. You're going to get a chance to, first of all, know yourself. You're going to get a chance to take our 5 Voice assessment and learn what makes you tick, who you are kind of at your core. Then you're going to get a chance to invite your teammates into that assessment, and so that they can learn more about themselves. And then here's the really fun part. When you do that, you're now ready to get your free 5 Voices Bootcamp. Mike, tell us, when they're ready for that boot camp, what's going to happen? What is that experience going to be like? Sell it for us, because I actually think this is one of the most profound experiences that a team could have, and it's for free. So go ahead, Mike.
Well, and you mentioned this. You said the word psychological safety, and we borrowed that from a study that Google did called Aristotle. They found that there was no such team in the world that was highly effective and high performing without psychological safety. It was the first key ingredient. So we start there. So the Five Voices Bootcamp is really an experience where you learn, who am I? How am I wired? What's my personality? Who is Bronson? How is he different from me, right? How is Hunter different? So you learn initially what lacks on your team and how you can learn to value and appreciate and bring everyone's best to the table. Then the next thing you do is you go through dynamics, which we say often, Bronson, our clients say, we actually had a lot of fun. We laughed. Sometimes we cried, like learning the dynamics of like, hey, did you realize that, Hunter's a creative and Mike's a guardian, and so they don't understand each other? Do you realize that, Bronson's a pioneer and, Amy's a nurturer, and so, she totally doesn't understand how he sees the world, and she has to like mentor him as one of our insights. And all of a sudden, there's these dynamics that go on in a team. And a lot of people say, Bronson, it's like we're reading their mail. We'll do an experience for the first time, even virtually on Zoom, and they'll say, have you been sitting in our conference room? Like, how did you know that about us? Because human nature is ridiculously predictable. So we help the team understand just at a basic level, who's at the table, what do they bring at their best, what are their blind spots, and how can we help each other overcome those things so that we can perform at the highest levels.
Yeah, that's great. And as we do this show, we're going through these team exercises. We're showing off different parts of the Invincible product. And I know if you're just tuning in, you just have a lot of questions like, what is Invincible? What is the Invincible operating system? What are these exercises? What is Org Clarity? How many of these tools are there? How do we teach them? How do we there's just I know you got questions, whether you're a team leader, whether you're HR, whether you're an executive, whether you're a team member, fill in the blank. I know you got questions. So we just make it simple. We say, you know what? All of those things are actually really simple. Let's just start with the boot camp, because the boot camp is going to do some really important things. It's going to let you see the power of our tools up close and personal. So you're going to get to see the power of our 5-voice assessment, of our 5-voice dynamics, and then you're also going to get connected with one of our experts. So when you do that free boot camp, it's not something you do on your own. We actually let one of our experts connect with you. And so you'll set up a time with them to get on Zoom. And again, this is free. You'll set up a time with them on Zoom, and they're going to say, okay, I have your results from your assessment that you did. Let's just talk through it. And they're going to show you visuals with your team members on the visuals. And you're going to do exactly what Mike said. You're going to be like, what? Like, do you know us? Where are you in the room with us? Like, that's exactly what happens. You just nailed it. That's exactly how our meetings flow. That's exactly what happens when he speaks. And that's exactly what happens when she does it. Like, it's all of a sudden you're just telling them like, look, this is predictable, like Mike said. So I know you have questions. You're trying to figure out a lot of stuff. Here's the thing. Ask yourself this. Do you want to unlock your people? And what we mean by that is help them perform better, help them be more self-aware, help them actually enjoy their life more, help them just be unlocked, help them be liberated. Do you want all the people around you to be unlocked? If you answer yes to that, here's what I want you to do. Do the free 5 Voices Bootcamp. It's the first step on our journey to unlocking everyone, and it's free. And so you don't have to worry about investing in something you don't believe in. It's our way of letting you really see the power of Giant. Mike, any final words before we wrap up this live stream? It's been awesome going through Org Clarity. It's been awesome talking about the boot camp. Drop something on us at the end here. What you got?
Yeah, I got two things. Number one is I'm going to do this. I'm going to honor Tracy, because people don't know that the reason why this show is so smooth and there's like visuals and there's comments and there's questions coming in is because Tracy's in the background as an amazing guardian pioneer, just doing her job, just cruise missiling and making sure everything goes off without a hitch. So those of you who don't have a guardian pioneer in your organization, I highly recommend you find one, because Tracy's a rock star and she's the reason why this show actually happens. So there's that. And then the second thing, Bronson, is really this. Every time we do this, I learn a ton. We do this every single day, and yet I'm learning every time we do this. So my aha today was this. We move so fast and we have such a desire to change the world and raise the standard of leadership. It reminded me today the importance of slowing down, because I'm already tempted to go straight to tactics. So I'm like, you know what? As one of the leaders of the organization, I got to remember that that's already my tendency. And we've already talked about last night, you had an experience where tactics were driving strategy. So it's like, okay, thank you, Bronson. You've reminded me today that even though we're supposed to be teaching this stuff, and we are experts to an extent, but to your point, we haven't figured this stuff out. We still have to work on it. So my takeaway today is really the aha of every time I use one of these tools, I learn something. So that's it for me.
Yeah, that's awesome. That is a great way to end the show. I will see you back here next week, although I'll see you today, tomorrow. We talk on the phone nonstop, but I'll see you on this show next week, same time, and we'll be digging into more exercises or potentially something else. We'll see. We got some things in the work we might unveil in the next couple of weeks here. Mike, thanks so much.
You too, bud. Have a good day.